He screamed in her face, his spit flying, calling her a trespasser, a fraud, and unfit to breathe the air in the VIP lounge. He thought his Italian suit gave him power. He thought her oversized hoodie and tired eyes made her weak. But Martin Graves, the director of VIP services, made a fatal miscalculation. He didn't know that the black woman he was humiliating wasn't just a passenger on the Gulfstream G650 idling on the tarmac. She was the one who had just acquired the entire airline. Watch closely, because the silence that follows his screaming is the sound of a career ending instantly. The heat radiating off the tarmac at Van Nuys Airport, VNY, in Los Angeles, was enough to distort the air, making the sleek white fuselages of the private jets look like they were rippling in a mirage. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a peak time for the Apex Signature Terminal, the most exclusive fixed-base operator, FBO, on the West Coast. Inside the terminal, the air was chilled to a crisp 68 degrees. The lobby smelled of white tea and old money. It was a space designed to intimidate anyone who couldn't afford a $30,000 charter flight to Aspen. Julianne Sterling sat in the far corner of the Platinum Lounge, a secluded area reserved for clients owning heavy jets, Bombardier Global 7500s, and Gulfstream G650ERs. Julianne didn't look like the typical clientele of Apex. She wasn't wearing a Chanel suit like the senator's wife near the window, nor was she draped in Balenciaga streetwear like the 20-year-old rapper pacing near the espresso machine. Julianne was wearing a charcoal grey hoodie from a university tech hackathon, black leggings, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she was currently nursing a lukewarm bottle of sparkling water. She looked exhausted, and she had every right to be. For the last 72 hours, Julianne had been in a boardroom in Tokyo, finalizing a hostile takeover that would merge her logistics company, Sterling Freight, with a massive international cargo carrier. She hadn't slept in 2 days. She had flown commercial back to LAX because her usual jet was under maintenance, and then took an Uber here to inspect a potential asset. She wanted to be invisible. She just wanted to sit, review the deed of sale on her tablet, and wait for her pilot to give the green light. But invisibility is a luxury not often afforded to black women in spaces like Apex, especially when they aren't dressed to signal their wealth. Enter Martin Graves. Martin was the newly promoted Director of Client Experience at Apex. He was a man who believed that luxury was a contact sport. He wore a suit that was tailored a little too tight, a watch that was a little too large, and a sneer that was permanently etched onto his face. Martin viewed his job not as service, but as gatekeeping. He was the guard dog of the elite, sniffing out anyone he deemed unworthy of the leather armchairs. He was currently berating a receptionist for not aligning the magazines perfectly parallel to the table edge when he spotted Julianne. His eyes narrowed. In his mind, he ran a quick calculation. No jewelry, no entourage, no designer luggage, just a battered leather backpack at her feet. She was typing on an iPad, looking completely at ease. To Martin, she was an anomaly, a stain on his pristine aesthetic. He marched over to the reception desk, tapping his manicured fingernails on the marble counter. "Sabrina," he snapped at the young blonde girl working the phones. "Who is that in the platinum corner?" Sabrina looked up, flustered. "I'm not sure, sir. She walked in about 10 minutes ago." She scanned a QR code at the turnstile and went straight in. The system turned green, so I didn't stop her. The system turned green. Martin scoffed. "Systems glitch, Sabrina. Look at her. Does she look like she owns a membership that costs 50 grand a year?" "Well, you can't always tell," Sabrina started, her voice small. "I can tell," Martin interrupted, straightening his tie. She's probably a PA, or a nanny waiting for a family. Or worse, she slipped in behind the rapper's entourage and thinks she can score free champagne. This is a secure facility, not a bus station. Martin smoothed his hair back. He lived for moments like this, the power trip of correcting a situation. He stepped out from behind the desk, his heels clicking loudly on the polished floor tiles as he made a beeline for Julianne. Julianne was deep in thought, reading a clause about hangar lease agreements, when a shadow fell over her screen. She didn't look up immediately, assuming it was a server offering a refill. "Excuse me." A voice dripped with icy condescension from above her. Julianne blinked, her eyes tired, and looked up. She saw a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced arrogance. "Yes?" she asked, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. "This area is restricted," Martin said, crossing his arms. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't ask how she was. He just issued a command. "The staff break room is through the double doors near the hangar exit. Or, if you are waiting for a pickup, you need to wait outside the terminal gates." Julianne frowned, confused. She shifted in the plush leather chair. "I'm sorry, I'm not staff." Martin let out a short, dry laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor. "Clearly, staff are required to wear uniforms. So, I'm assuming you're with a client. Which party? The Henderson family? Or are you with Mr. Davids?" He gestured vaguely toward the rapper. "I'm not with anyone," Julianne said calmly. "I'm flying out. My plane is fueling on the ramp. Tail number N720JS. Martin stared at her. The idea was so laughable to him that he actually smirked. N720JS is a Bombardier Global 7500. It's an $80 million aircraft. "I know what it is," Julianne said, her patience thinning. She tapped her iPad screen to close the document. "Is there a problem?" "The problem," Martin said, his voice rising just enough to turn heads in the quiet lounge, "is that you are trespassing in a high security zone. I don't know how you got past the front desk, probably slipped in while the receptionists were busy, but you need to leave. Now." Julianne took a deep breath. She had dealt with men like Martin her entire career in Silicon Valley and logistics, the gatekeepers, the doubters. "Sir, if you check your manifest, you'll see my name. Julianne Sterling. I suggest you go back to the desk and look before you continue this conversation." Martin leaned down, placing his hands on the armrests of her chair, invading her personal space. It was a physical intimidation tactic he used often. "I don't need to check a manifest to know when someone doesn't belong, Ms. Sterling," he sneered, saying her name like it was a joke. "I have clients here who pay a premium for exclusivity and comfort. Your presence is disrupting that atmosphere. You look unwashed." The lounge went silent. The rapper stopped pacing. The senator's wife lowered her magazine. Julianne's eyes went cold. "Excuse me? You heard me?" Martin stood up, feeling emboldened by the silence, mistaking it for support. "I'm giving you 30 seconds to gather your trash and walk out the front door before I call airport security and have you removed for trespassing." Julianne didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and unlocked it. "You're making a mistake," she said softly. "A very expensive one." Martin Graves had a vein that throbbed in his forehead when he was angry, and right now it was pulsing like a warning light. He hated being challenged. He hated it even more when the person challenging him remained calm while he was losing composure. "Is that a threat?" Martin asked, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm stating a fact," Julianne replied, tapping on her screen. She was looking for the contact number of the CEO of Apex Aviation Group, the parent company of this terminal. She had met him during the acquisition talks 3 days ago. Martin snatched the phone out of her hand. The gasp from the room was audible. You do not touch a passenger. You certainly do not steal their property. But Martin was past the point of rationality. He was running on pure adrenaline and bias. "Hey!" Julianne stood up for the first time. She was tall, nearly 5'10", and even in sneakers, she looked Martin dead in the eye. "Give me my phone back." "You aren't calling anyone," Martin hissed, clutching her iPhone like it was a weapon he had disarmed. "You are leaving. Security!" he shouted toward the main entrance. "Security to the Platinum Lounge, now!" 2 large men in dark blazers, wearing earpieces, jogged over from the main entrance. They looked between Martin, who was red-faced and manic, and Julianne, who was standing still, her hands balled into fists at her sides. "Mr. Graves?" the lead guard, a man named Torres, asked. "What's the situation?" "This woman is trespassing." Martin pointed a shaking finger at Julianne. "She refused to identify her client. She has no valid boarding pass, and she is disturbing the peace. I want her escorted off the property immediately. Call LAPD if she resists." Torres looked at Julianne. He saw the intensity in her eyes, but he didn't see a threat. He was a seasoned guard, and his gut told him something was off. "Ma'am, do you have ID?" "My ID is in my bag," Julianne said, her voice steady but hard as steel. "And my phone is in his hand. If he gives it back, I can show you my boarding confirmation and the ownership papers for the aircraft." "Ownership papers?" Martin laughed loudly, turning to the other passengers in the lounge as if seeking an audience. "Did you hear that? She claims she owns the jet. Next, she'll say she owns the airport." He turned back to Julianne, his face twisting into a cruel smile. "Listen to me, you delusional grifter. People like you always have a story. You think because you act entitled, we'll be too scared to check you. But I'm the manager here. This is my terminal, and I say you're trash." Julianne stepped forward. "Give me my phone." "Or what?" Martin taunted. "You gonna fight me? Go ahead, make my day. Then I can have you arrested for assault, too." At that moment, the glass doors to the tarmac slid open. A pilot in a pristine uniform with 4 gold stripes on his shoulder walked in. He looked around the lounge, scanning the room until his eyes landed on the commotion. It was Captain David Reynolds, a veteran pilot who had flown for the Sterling family for 10 years. He saw Julianne standing there, looking cornered, and Martin holding her phone. "Ms. Sterling," Captain Reynolds called out, his voice booming. "We're fueled and ready for departure to London. Is everything all right?" Martin froze. He turned to look at the pilot. "You know this woman?" Captain Reynolds walked over, his face darkening as he assessed the situation. He stepped between Martin and Julianne. "Know her? She's my boss. That's Julianne Sterling. She's the CEO of Sterling Biologistics." The silence in the room deepened. It was heavy, suffocating. Martin blinked. His brain stalled. Sterling Biologistics? He had seen that name on the ticker tape of the news this morning. Something about a billion-dollar merger. But she looked like this? "Impossible," Martin muttered. She didn't show me a ticket." "I didn't have to," Julianne said, stepping around the pilot to face Martin again. She held out her hand. "Phone." Martin's hand went limp. He placed the phone in her palm. His arrogance was starting to crack, replaced by a cold seep of dread. But his ego wouldn't let him fold completely. Not yet. He had to double down. It was the only way men like him knew how to survive. Well, Martin straightened his jacket, trying to regain some dignity. "You should have identified yourself properly. You can't blame me for enforcing security protocols. You were dressed inappropriately." You looked suspicious. I was just doing my job. Your job, Julianne said, her voice dropping an octave, is to provide service to clients, not to profile them based on how they look or the color of their skin. It wasn't about race, Martin shouted, too quickly. Don't you play that card with me. It was about standards. Look at you. You look like you slept on a park bench. That's enough. Captain Reynolds stepped forward, but Julianne put a hand on his arm to stop him. It's okay, David, she said, never taking her eyes off Martin. Mr. Graves thinks this is about standards. He thinks this is his terminal. She tapped her phone screen, dialing a number. She put it on speaker. Who are you calling? Martin demanded, sweat starting to bead on his upper lip. Customer service? Go ahead. I'm the manager. I write the reports. I'm not calling customer service, Julianne said. The line rang twice. Then a deep, authoritative voice answered. Julianne, we were just talking about you. Have you landed in London yet? Not yet, Arthur, Julianne said. I'm still at Van Nuys, at the Apex terminal. Martin went pale. He recognized that voice. Everyone in the private aviation industry recognized that voice. It was Arthur Pemsley, the chairman of the board for Apex Aviation, the man who signed Martin's paychecks. Is there a delay with the jet? Arthur asked. Do we need to send a mechanic? No, the jet is fine, Julianne said, her eyes locking onto Martin's terrified face. The problem is with your personnel, specifically a manager named Martin Graves. He currently has security trying to remove me from the lounge because he thinks I look like, and I quote, trash. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. He said what? Arthur's voice was dangerously quiet. He also physically took my phone and screamed at me in front of your other clients, Julianne added. Arthur, do you remember that clause we discussed regarding the acquisition of the FBO network? Martin's knees began to shake. Acquisition? I remember, Arthur said. I'm invoking the immediate oversight clause, Julianne said. I'm not just a passenger, Martin, she said, addressing the trembling manager directly now. As of 9 a.m. this morning, my company, Sterling Ventures, acquired a 51% controlling stake in Apex Aviation Ground Services. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I don't just own the jet, Martin. I own this building. I own that desk you were standing behind. And technically, I own you. The words, I own you, hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. For a normal person, this would be the moment of retreat, the moment of apology. But Martin Graves was not a normal person. He was a man built entirely on the fragile foundation of his own ego. If he admitted he was wrong now, in front of the rapper, the senator's wife, his staff, and the pilot, his entire world would crumble. His brain scrambled for an exit strategy, a lifeline. That's a trick, Martin stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Julianne's phone. That's an AI voice. I've seen it on the news. You recorded Arthur's voice from a YouTube clip and used an app. You're insane. You're actually psychotic. Julianne lowered the phone, her expression unreadable. Arthur is still on the line, Martin. Do you want to tell him he's an AI? I'm not talking to your fake phone, Martin screamed. He spun around to face Torres and the other security guard. Why are you just standing there? Arrest her. She's hacking the airport network. This is corporate espionage. She's trying to steal client data. Torres, the security guard, looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight. Mr. Graves, she has the chairman on the line. Maybe we should verify. I am the verification, Martin roared, his face turning a deep, blotchy plum color. I am the director of this terminal. I sign your timesheets, Torres. If you don't put handcuffs on her right now, You're fired. I'll make sure you never work security in this state again." It was a desperate gamble, but it worked. Torres had a mortgage. He had 2 kids in private school. The threat of immediate termination was a powerful motivator. "Mom," Torres said, stepping forward, his hand resting on his belt near his taser. "I need you to step away from the pilot and come with us to the holding room. We can sort this out there." "I'm not going to a holding room," Julianne said, her voice hard. "I'm going to my jet." "Grab her!" Martin yelled. Torres reached out and clamped a heavy hand onto Julianne's shoulder. "Get your hands off her!" Captain Reynolds, the pilot, shoved Torres back. Suddenly the lounge erupted. The second guard moved to restrain the pilot. Martin was shouting obscenities. Julianne was backed against the glass wall. "Hey!" The voice came from the other side of the room. It wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that cut through the noise. The young rapper, who had been watching the entire scene in silence, walked over. He was wearing a Diamond Supply Cumber hoodie and had a diamond chain that cost more than the building's HVAC system. He pulled down his sunglasses. "You touch her," the rapper said to Torres, "and my legal team will own your house by sunset." Martin scoffed, turning his vitriol onto the new target. "Stay out of this, kid. Go back to your corner and sip your juice box. This is adult business." The rapper laughed. He extended a hand to Julianne. "Julianne Sterling, right? I recognized you from the Forbes 30 Under 30s gala in San Francisco last year. I'm Jaden, but they call me J-Rock." Julianne took his hand, managing a weak smile, despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Good to see you, Jaden. I didn't know you flew out of Van Nuys." "I do when I'm closing deals," Jaden said. He turned to Martin. "You're an idiot, bro. She's not just a CEO. She's the one who built the logistics software that Amazon tried to buy for $3 billion, and she said no. And you think she's faking a phone call?" Martin looked between Jaden and Julianne. The walls were closing in. He was losing the narrative. He needed a nuclear option. He pulled out his own radio. "Central, this is Graves. I have a code red in the Platinum Lounge. Hostile intruders. Multiple subjects. Pilot is non-compliant and violent. Requesting airport police immediately. Bring the cuffs." He smirked at Julianne. "You think you own the place? Let's see how you handle the LAPD. By the time Arthur Pemsley gets here from his golf club, you'll be in a cell downtown getting processed for assault and trespassing. And once you're in the system, the press will destroy you." "Black CEO arrested in airport brawl." That's the headline, isn't it? Julianne felt a cold knot in her stomach. He was right about one thing, the optics. Even if she was right, being dragged out in handcuffs would tank her stock price. It would ruin the merger. Martin knew how to weaponize the system against her. She looked at Captain Reynolds. "David, get the engines running. We're leaving." "You're not going anywhere." Martin blocked the path to the sliding glass doors, spreading his arms wide like an erratic goalkeeper. "I've locked the tarmac doors. Electronic override. No one leaves until the police get here." He rushed behind the reception desk and hammered a sequence into the security console. The red LEDs above the sliding doors turned solid. Locked. "Now!" Martin panted, leaning over the desk, his eyes wild. "We wait!" The atmosphere in the lounge was suffocating. The air conditioning hummed, oblivious to the standoff. Julianne took a deep breath. Panic was useless. Strategy was everything. She looked at the reception desk where Martin was guarding the computer like a dragon guarding gold. "Sabrina," Julianne said softly to the young receptionist who was cowering near the filing cabinets. Sabrina jumped. Yes? "Does this terminal still run on the Legacy 7 operating system?" Julianne asked. Sabrina blinked, confused by the technical question. I think so. It crashes a lot. Julianne nodded. I know it does, because my company, Sterling Freight, wrote the back-end code for Legacy 7 10 years ago before we sold the license. Julianne didn't move toward the door. She moved toward the senator's wife, who was sitting near the window, holding an iPad. Excuse me, Julianne said politely. May I borrow your tablet for 60 seconds? Mine is locked out of the local Wi-Fi because someone, she glared at Martin, blocked my MAC address. The senator's wife, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor Vance, handed it over without hesitation. Fry him, dear. Julianne took the tablet. Her fingers flew across the screen. She wasn't hacking. She didn't need to. She was an administrator. She opened a browser, typed in the IP address of the local server, and accessed the back-end login. What are you doing? Martin sneered from the desk. Playing Angry Birds? I'm accessing the CRM, Julianne murmured, mostly to herself. I want to see your notes, Martin. I want to see why you target people. You can't get in there, Martin laughed. That's password protected with biometric clearance. And who do you think set up the biometric protocols? Julianne hit enter. On the massive flight display screens on the wall, the ones usually showing departure times and weather maps, the image suddenly flickered. The weather map of Cabo San Lucas vanished. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared. It was the internal client log for the Apex terminal. The text was large enough for everyone in the room to read. Date, Nov 26. Client, Mr. T. Higgins. Notes, code 3, looks poor. Checked bag for drugs. Found nothing but wasted my time. Date, Nov 24. Client, Ms. L. Garcia. Notes, denied entry to lounge. Too loud. Claimed she was a doctor. Unlikely. Date, Nov 21. Client, the Washington family. Black. Notes, code red. Watch them closely. They steal snacks. Put them in the overflow room, away from the real clients. The room went deathly silent. Jaden, J. Rock, stepped closer to the screen, reading the notes. Yo, they steal snacks? Are you serious? Julianne scrolled down using the tablet. The screen refreshed. Date, today. Subject, unknown female, Julianne Sterling. Notes, trespasser, aggressive, urban attitude, likely prostitute or assistant. Eject immediately. Urban attitude, Julianne read the words aloud. Her voice was calm, but it vibrated with suppressed rage. She looked up at Martin. Is this your standard of luxury, Martin? Racial profiling and misogyny logged into a corporate server? Martin was pale. He tried to cover the computer screen at the desk with his hands, as if that would stop the projection on the wall. Turn it off. That's private company property. That's a violation of privacy. It's not privacy when it's hate speech, Mrs. Vance said, standing up. She adjusted her blazer. My husband is Senator Vance. He sits on the Aviation Oversight Committee. We've been wondering why Apex has had so many discrimination complaints lately. She turned to Martin, her eyes like flint. Now I know. Martin looked like a trapped animal. The evidence was literally written on the wall in 10-foot letters. It's out of context, Martin yelled, sweat dripping down his temples. Those are shorthand notes for security. You don't understand the pressure of this job. I understand perfectly, Julianne said. She tapped the screen one last time. And I also understand that you've been embezzling. Martin froze. What? I'm looking at the voided transactions, Julianne said, pointing to a new column on the screen. You charge clients for premium catering. $500 for a bottle of wine, $200 for caviar. But then you void the transaction in the system, so the company doesn't see the revenue. But you insist the client pays cash or Venmo to a service account for speed. She looked at him. How much cash is in your pocket right now, Martin? Or should I check the safe in your office? The security guards, Torres and his partner, looked at each other. They stepped away from Julianne and turned toward Martin. "Boss," Torres said, his voice dropping the deference. "Is that true? Did you pocket the cash from the Saudi flight last week?" "Shut up!" Martin shrieked. "She's manipulating the data. She's a witch!" Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights flashed against the glass of the terminal, reflecting off the white jets. "Finally!" Martin yelled, a look of maniacal relief washing over him. "The police! You're done, Sterling! You're done!" He ran toward the main entrance as the automatic doors slid open. But the officer who walked in wasn't a stranger. And he wasn't alone. The man who entered wore the uniform of the airport police, but his badge was gold, indicating high rank. He was a thick-set man with a mustache that hid a cruel mouth. This was Commander Holloway, and behind him, flanking him like bodyguards, were two more officers. Martin practically threw himself at Holloway. "Uncle Rick, thank God." "Uncle." Julianne's eyes narrowed. This was the connection. This was why Martin felt untouchable. He was protected by the badge. "What's going on here, Martin?" Commander Holloway boomed, his hand resting casually on his holster. He scanned the room, ignoring the giant spreadsheet on the wall and focusing immediately on the black woman in the hoodie and the young black man with the diamond chain. "These people!" Martin pointed frantically at Julianne and Jaden. "They broke in! They hacked the system! They assaulted me! And she..." He pointed at Julianne. "She claims she owns the place. She's mentally unstable, Rick. You need to take her down. She's dangerous." Holloway stepped into the lounge, his boots heavy on the marble. He stopped in front of Julianne. He didn't ask for her side of the story. He didn't ask for ID. He just saw a problem that needed removing. "Ma'am," Holloway said, his voice low and threatening. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "You're not going to ask what happened?" Julianne asked, holding her ground. "I know what happened," Holloway said. "My nephew tells me you're causing a disturbance. At a federal airfield, that's a felony. Now hands behind your back, or I will use force." "Officer," Senator Vance's wife stepped forward. "You are making a mistake. This man," she pointed to Martin, "is a thief and a bigot. The evidence is on the wall." Holloway glanced at the screen, saw the racism, saw the embezzlement logs, and simply shrugged. "I don't investigate computer screens, lady. I investigate trespassing. And right now, Martin says she's trespassing." He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Rick," Martin whispered, leaning in close to the commander. "Get her phone. She has a recording. We need to delete it." Holloway nodded subtly. He reached for Julianne's arm. "Don't touch me," Julianne said, pulling back. "Resisting arrest," Martin shouted gleefully. "That's another charge. Get her, Uncle Rick." Holloway lunged. He grabbed Julianne's wrist and twisted it behind her back with unnecessary force. Julianne gasped in pain, dropping the borrowed tablet. "Hey!" Jaden rushed forward, but one of the other officers tackled him to the ground. "Stop!" Captain Reynolds yelled, but he was held back by the third officer. It was a nightmare scenario. The truth didn't matter. The money didn't matter. In that moment, brute force and corruption were winning. Julianne was bent over the reception desk, the cold metal of the handcuffs clicking onto her left wrist. Martin stood over her, gloating. He leaned down to her ear. "I told you, you don't belong here. I win. Now, say goodbye to your career." The front door slid open again. But this time it wasn't police. 4 men in dark suits walked in. They moved with a synchronized precision that made the police officers look like amateurs. They wore earpieces. They didn't look at the jets. They didn't look at the screen. They looked at Commander Holloway. Behind them walked an older man with silver hair and a walking cane. He wore a 3-piece suit that cost more than Martin's annual salary. It was Arthur Pemsley, the chairman. And walking right beside him was a woman in a sharp navy blazer carrying a briefcase. Apex's general counsel. "Unlock her," Arthur said. His voice wasn't loud, but it stopped the entire room cold. Commander Holloway looked up, still holding Julianne's arm. "Who are you? This is an active police scene. Back off." "I am Arthur Pemsley," the man said, stepping closer. "I own this airport lease, and the men behind me are federal agents from the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division. We've been building a case against an embezzlement ring at this airport for 6 months." Arthur looked at Martin, who was now trembling so hard his teeth were chattering. "We knew someone was stealing," Arthur said coldly. "We just didn't know who. Until Ms. Sterling called me and triggered the audit." Arthur looked at Holloway. "Let go of my CEO, Commander, unless you want to be added to the indictment for obstruction of justice and conspiracy." Holloway froze. He looked at the FBI agents, who were already moving to flank him. He looked at Martin, who was backing away toward the break room. Holloway released Julianne's arm. The handcuffs dangled from one wrist. Julianne stood up. She rubbed her sore wrist. She took a deep breath, adjusted her hoodie, and turned to face Martin. "You didn't win, Martin," she said, her voice ringing clear in the silent terminal. She reached out and took the terminal master key card from Martin's shirt pocket. "You're fired, and looking at those agents." She nodded toward the FBI team who were now handcuffing Martin. "I think your next flight is going to be straight to federal prison." The silence in the Apex terminal was replaced by the chaotic, rhythmic clicking of handcuffs. Martin Graves, the man who had spent the last hour posturing like a king in his own castle, was now bent over the very desk he used to terrorize his staff. His Italian suit jacket was bunched up awkwardly as an FBI agent patted him down. "You're making a mistake!" Martin shrieked, his face pressed against the cold marble countertop. "My uncle is the commander. Tell them, Rick. Tell them this is a jurisdiction error." But Commander Uncle Rick Holloway had his own problems. The 2 other federal agents had relieved him of his duty belt. He wasn't in handcuffs yet, but he was backed into a corner, his face a mask of sweating, grey fear. "I didn't know about the money," Holloway stammered to the lead FBI agent, a tall woman named Agent Miller. "I just responded to a distress call. I have no knowledge of any embezzlement." "Save it for the interview, Commander," Agent Miller said, her voice dry. "We've been tracking the wire transfers from Martin's service account for months. 30% of the skimmed cash went into a shell company registered to your wife's maiden name. We have the bank records." Holloway's legs seemed to give out. He slumped against the wall. The protection Martin thought he had was actually the anchor dragging them both down. Julianne stood in the center of the room, rubbing her bruised wrist. Arthur Pemsley, the chairman, walked over to her. He looked tired, aged by the revelation of rot within his company. "Julianne," Arthur said softly, offering her a silk handkerchief. "I am profoundly sorry. I knew the numbers weren't adding up at Van Nuys, but I never imagined this. The culture here. It's repugnant." "It's not just culture, Arthur," Julianne said, her voice steady. "It's a system. Martin felt comfortable treating me like a criminal because he knew the police would back him up. He knew the staff was too terrified to speak. He built a fortress of bias." She turned to Sabrina, the young receptionist who was still trembling by the filing cabinets. "Sabrina?" Julianne called out gently. Sabrina looked up, eyes wide. Am I fired, Ms. Sterling? I didn't stop him." "You were a victim of a hostile work environment," Julianne said. "You aren't fired. In fact, you're the only person who told the truth when he asked about the green light on the turnstile." Julianne looked at the FBI agents who were now hauling a sobbing Martin toward the exit. "Wait," Julianne said. The agents paused. Martin looked back, his eyes red, snot running down his nose. He looked pathetic. He looked small. "Miss Sterling," Martin whimpered. "Please, I can fix this. I can work it off. Don't let them take me. I have a mortgage. I have a reputation." Julianne walked up to him. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She simply looked at him with the pity one reserves for a broken thing. "You don't have a reputation, Martin," she said. "You have a rap sheet. And regarding your mortgage, I wouldn't worry about it. Where you're going, housing is free." "You bitch!" Martin lunged, snapping, but the agents yanked him back and dragged him out the sliding doors, his screams echoing across the tarmac until they were swallowed by the sound of a jet engine revving up. Julianne turned back to the room. The rapper, J. Rock, was high-fiving the pilot. Senator Vance's wife was typing furiously on her phone, likely leaking the story to the press. "David," Julianne said to her pilot, "cut the engines. We aren't flying to London yet." "Ma'am?" Captain Reynolds asked. "I have a terminal to clean up," Julianne said, looking around the Platinum Lounge. "Arthur, get the HR team down here. I want every single employee interviewed. I want every security log from the last 5 years audited. If anyone else was treated the way I was today, I want to know about it. And I want them compensated." She walked over to the wall where the spreadsheet was still projected, the blacklist of clients Martin had profiled. "And take this down," she ordered. "Burn it." 3 months later. The heat rising off the asphalt at Van Nuys Airport was just as oppressive as it had been on that fateful Tuesday in November. But inside the private terminal, the temperature was no longer the only thing that had changed. The very soul of the building had been ripped out, scrubbed clean, and rebuilt. The heavy, frosted glass doors that used to separate the elite from the service staff had been removed, replaced by an open-concept archway that invited light into every corner of the lobby. The scent of intimidating, chemically manufactured white tea was gone. In its place was the smell of genuine, fresh-roasted coffee and fresh flowers, lilies and hydrangeas, arranged in vases that didn't look like they cost more than a car. A black Cadillac Escalade pulled up to the curb, the tires crunching softly on the pavement. The driver, a large man named Kevin, who had worked security at the airport for 10 years, stepped out and opened the rear door with a genuine smile. "We're here, Ms. Sterling," Kevin said. Julianne Sterling stepped out. She wasn't hiding in a hoodie today, but she wasn't wearing a costume of wealth either. She wore a cream-colored linen suit, tailored to perfection, paired with a simple white t-shirt, and, true to her roots, a fresh pair of sneakers. She didn't need high heels to feel tall. She didn't need diamonds to feel valuable. She walked through the automatic doors, and for the first time in 90 days, she didn't feel a knot of anxiety in her stomach. The Platinum Lounge sign, with its exclusionary gold lettering, had been taken down weeks ago. In its place, a sleek, modern digital display read, "The Sterling Terminal. Welcome." Inside, the transformation was absolute. The dark, brooding leather chairs that Martin had prized, mostly because they were uncomfortable enough to keep people from lingering, were gone. The space was now filled with ergonomic, modern seating, communal work tables made of reclaimed wood, and private pods for calls. It looked less like a mausoleum for the ultra-rich, and more like a high-end tech incubator. But the biggest change wasn't the furniture. It was the people. Behind the main concierge desk stood Sabrina. 3 months ago, Sabrina had been a terrified 22-year-old receptionist, shrinking under the weight of Martin's verbal abuse, too afraid to speak up when she saw injustice. Today, Sabrina was unrecognizable. She wore a sharp navy blazer with a lapel pin that read, "Director of Guest Services." Her hair was styled, her shoulders were back, and she was currently managing 3 different phones and a walk-in client with the precision of an air traffic controller. She looked up as Julianne approached, and her professional mask melted into a warm, genuine grin. "Good morning, Ms. Sterling," Sabrina chirped, tapping a final command into her keyboard. "Your flight plan to Tokyo is filed. Captain Reynolds is doing the pre-flight check now. Oh, and the catering team wanted to know if you wanted the spicy tuna rolls or the Mediterranean platter for the flight." "Spicy tuna, please," Julianne said, leaning against the desk. "How's the floor today, Sabrina?" "Busy," Sabrina said, her eyes shining. "We're at 90% capacity. Since we changed the pricing model and got rid of the membership-only restriction for the lounge, we've attracted a whole new demographic. Tech startups, music producers, families flying for medical treatment. It's alive in here." Julianne nodded, satisfied. "Any issues? Any Martin types?" Sabrina's expression hardened slightly, a glimpse of her newfound steel. "We had one gentleman earlier, a hedge fund manager. He was snapping his fingers at the barista, trying to cut the line. I politely informed him that at Sterling Terminal, money buys you a flight, not the right to be rude. He quieted down pretty fast." "Good," Julianne said softly. "That's what I like to hear." "Speaking of Martin," Sabrina lowered her voice, sliding a heavy manila envelope across the marble counter. "This came for you via courier this morning. It's from the Department of Justice." Julianne took the envelope. She felt the weight of it. She knew what was inside, but seeing the official seal stamped in red ink made it real. She walked over to one of the private glass-walled pods and sat down, sliding her finger under the flap to tear it open. Inside was the final sentencing report. The fall of Martin Graves had not been a graceful stumble. It had been a collision with reality at Mach speed. After the FBI dragged him out of the terminal, the investigation had widened like a sinkhole. It wasn't just the $1.2 million he had embezzled through voided catering transactions. It was the kickbacks from fuel suppliers. It was the illegal subletting of hangar space to unregistered cargo planes. And then there was Commander Holloway. Uncle Rick. Julianne scanned the document, her eyes catching the key paragraphs. Defendant Martin Graves. Guilty on 14 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of grand larceny, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice. Sentenced to 68 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Restitution ordered in the amount of $1,450,000. Defendant Richard Holloway. Guilty on counts of corruption, acceptance of bribes, and misuse of police authority. Sentenced to 4 years. Julianne leaned back in her chair. She thought about the look on Martin's face when he had screamed that she was trash. He had been so certain of his invincibility, protected by a badge he didn't earn and a suit he couldn't afford. Now he was sitting in a cell in Lompoc, likely wearing an orange jumpsuit that fit worse than her hoodie ever did. His assets had been seized. The boat, the condo in Marina del Rey, the leased Porsche. His wife had filed for divorce 2 weeks after the arrest when the FBI froze their joint accounts. He had lost everything because he couldn't check his ego at the door. It was the definition of hard karma. The universe hadn't just slapped him. It had erased him. "Bad news?" The voice broke Julianne out of her reverie. She looked up to see Jaden, known to the world as the platinum-selling artist J-Rock, standing in the doorway of her pod. He was wearing a vintage Lakers jersey and holding a green smoothie. "Justice," Julianne corrected, tapping the paper. "Martin got nearly 6 years." Jaden let out a low whistle, shaking his head. 6 years. Damn. All because he wanted to play gatekeeper. Jaden walked in and sat on the edge of the table. The dynamic between them had shifted from strangers in a crisis to mutual business partners. After the incident, Jayden had moved his entire touring fleet to the Sterling terminal. "You know," Jayden said, looking out at the tarmac where his Gulfstream was being polished, "I used to hate coming here. I'd walk in, and I could feel them watching me, waiting for me to slip up, waiting to see if my credit card would decline. I spent millions here, and they still looked at me like I was there to steal the silverware." He looked at Julianne. "You changed that. My mom flew out yesterday to visit my aunt in Chicago. She called me crying. She said the staff treated her like a queen. She said nobody followed her around. That means more to me than the jets, Julianne. For real." "That's the goal, Jayden," Julianne smiled. "Luxury shouldn't feel like a test you have to pass." "Well, you aced it," Jayden said, standing up and checking his diamond-encrusted watch. "I got a run. London calling. But hey, I'm hosting a charity gala next month for inner-city arts programs. I want you at the head table." "Send me the details," Julianne promised. As Jayden left, Julianne gathered her things. It was time to board. But as she walked back through the main lounge, something caught her eye. In the corner, near the window overlooking the runway, the exact same spot where Julianne had been sitting when Martin accosted her, sat a young girl. She couldn't have been more than 18. She was black, wearing oversized headphones, a denim jacket covered in patches, and clutching a battered sketchbook. She looked terrified. She was shrinking into the chair, trying to take up as little space as possible. Every time a server walked by, she flinched, as if expecting to be told to leave. Julianne stopped. The déjà vu was powerful enough to stop her heart for a beat. She turned to Sabrina at the desk. "Who is that?" Sabrina glanced over. "That's Maya. She's a scholarship student. She won a design competition, and the prize was a trip to New York to meet with a fashion institute. The donor paid for a private charter, but she's been sitting there for an hour, afraid to even get a water." Julianne handed her bag to Kevin. "Give me a minute." She walked across the lounge. The sound of her sneakers was soft on the rug. She approached the girl slowly, so as not to startle her. "Hey," Julianne said softly. Maya jumped, her eyes snapping up. Panic flashed across her face. She immediately started gathering her sketchbook. "I'm sorry. I'm waiting for—" "Relax," Julianne said, holding up a hand and offering a warm smile. She pulled up the chair opposite Maya and sat down. "You aren't in trouble. I just wanted to see what you were drawing." Maya hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. It's just sketches. For a dress. Can I see?" Slowly Maya opened the book. The drawing was incredible, a futuristic avant-garde gown that looked like it was made of liquid metal. "This is amazing," Julianne said, genuinely impressed. "You have a serious eye for structure." "Thank you," Maya whispered, relaxing a fraction of an inch. I've never been in a place like this before. I feel like everyone knows I don't belong here." The words hit Julianne like a physical blow. "I don't belong here." It was the lie that society whispered to people like Maya and people like Julianne every single day. It was the lie that Martin Graves had tried to enforce with a badge and a shout. Julianne leaned forward. "Maya, look at me." The girl looked up. 3 months ago, a man stood right where you are sitting and screamed in my face that I didn't belong here, Julianne said intensely. "He told me I looked like trash. He tried to have me arrested because I was wearing a hoodie." Maya's eyes went wide. What did you do?" "I bought the building," Julianne said. Maya gasped, looking around the terminal, then back at Julianne. You're the owner? You're Julianne Sterling?" I am, Julianne said. And I bought it specifically so that no one would ever feel the way you're feeling right now, ever again. She reached out and tapped the sketchbook. You earned your seat in this room, Maya. Your talent got you here. This chair, it's yours. That coffee bar, it's yours. You occupy this space because you are worthy of it. Do not let the architecture or the price tags or the people in suits make you feel small. You are the future. They should be lucky to be sitting next to you. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes. She took a shuddering breath and nodded. Okay, thank you. Sabrina, Julianne called out, waving the manager over. Sabrina appeared instantly. Yes, Ms. Sterling? Maya here is going to New York for a fashion debut, Julianne said. Make sure the flight crew knows it's a special occasion. I want sparkling cider on ice for her, and let's upgrade her ground transport in New York to the limo service. Consider it done, Sabrina beamed. Julianne stood up. She felt lighter than she had in years. The ghost of Martin Graves was gone. The trauma of that day had been transmuted into something powerful, a legacy. She walked toward the tarmac doors where Captain Reynolds was waiting. The sun was blindingly bright as the doors slid open. Ready to go, boss? Reynolds asked. Julianne paused on the threshold. She looked back one last time. She saw Jaden laughing on a call. She saw the diverse staff working with pride. And she saw Maya, sitting up straight in the leather chair, sketching furiously, a glass of sparkling cider next to her, looking like she owned the world. Yes, David, Julianne said, turning her face toward the sun and the waiting jet. I'm ready. Let's fly. And that is the story of how one arrogant manager learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Martin Graves thought power was a suit and a tie. He thought he could judge a person's worth by their hoodie and the color of their skin. But he forgot the golden rule of business and life, humility. In a twist of karma that only reality can provide, Julianne Sterling didn't just fire him. She dismantled the entire corrupt system he relied on. Today, Julianne continues to run Sterling Biologistics and has turned the Apex terminal into a model of inclusive luxury. As for Martin? Well, let's just say the only thing he's managing these days is the laundry schedule in cell block C. What do you think? Have you ever been judged by your appearance in a store or a high-end place? How did you handle it? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story.